Oh God. Okay. We're going to talk about another one of my delusions, that my uncle was Kurt Cobain. Only not really. So sorry if anybody clicked on this and was like, oh, is she the secret niece of Kurt Cobain? I wish, but no, all my family was just a poor, nothing, nobody from Kansas. So, but if you're still here, hi, I wrote a memoir in 2018 about how I was raised by a survival sex worker. I don't want to say prostitute. That's not really the right thing to say, I don't think, anymore. So I don't think she was a sex worker by choice, at least not very much, but survival sex worker who got addicted to meth. And I'm her child, and you know, she obviously had some pretty bad abuse toward me and my siblings. So I wrote a book about that, and now, and I've written a lot of books, but now I'm writing one about my family. Almost like, what got me into that mess, you know? So, I think not even a lot of my family, like my siblings, know that my mom had some trauma, and that's pretty common for people who suffer from substance abuse disorder. That's pretty common with people who end up homeless or in the corrections system, right? So, yeah, one of the major moments of trauma that I'm pretty sure had a huge impact on her was she had one brother. He was, as far as I know, I never met him, a lovely human being. He loved Tolkien, and he got a girl in high school pregnant, and they got married, little high school sweethearts, in the 1970s. I want to say 1974. And he had a way with, I think, music and art and writing. And he kind of came of age finally when the Vietnam War was coming to a close, but it was always a worry, and he was definitely not a fan of the Vietnam War and didn't want to be drafted, as a lot of people felt as teenagers growing up in that time. My mother was, if I remember right, like 11 or 12 years younger than her brother. So without a father, which is another probable reason for why she used substances and had a lot of like partners and children from different dads and stuff like that, and struggled with self-image and self-worth and stuff. This brother was basically like the only male figure in her life, right? And so I'm not saying like everything that she did was right, but understandable, you know, considering some of the circumstances. And one of the things that was probably the most impactful for her is her brother died by suicide at about 27, 28 years old. And I had heard from people, I'm not sure where. I watched a lot of like A&E biography and the History Channel and stuff with my granny. I watched a lot of Oprah. So there was something about this 27 club, right? These people who by 27 end up dying by suicide. A lot of them are artists, and they struggle, maybe because they're sensitive and they see the world differently, which is what makes their art great, but it also is what makes living so painful. That's the vibe I get. I'm not really a social scientist, and pretty much all of my information about pop culture and the world is like what could be easily looked up on the internet from a search, or, you know, coffee table books. Like, I did not grow up intelligent. I'm I know that I have a master's degree, but I wouldn't call myself an expert at all. So that's what I know. And there was just this link in my mind from a really young age of this 27 Club and my uncle, who I never met, who died by suicide. And the reason I think I thought that is because he was treated with such reverence in my family. So my book that I'm in the middle of writing about my family, to kind of figure out why in the world did it get to the place that it did, just for fun. You know, I love historical fiction, so I'm like, what was life like for my granny? I wonder. So I'm going back to that. Like, my granny was born in Tennessee. She was raised in Kentucky in the 1950s. She was sexually assaulted by 3 men in the woods. And the result of that was a pregnancy at 17 that she didn't ever plan on having. She wanted to graduate high school. That changed her life and the course of 3 generations' lives forever. And it has been also really hard to work through, like, what a selfish choice. I hate those men. I can't believe it, because look at the life that we have now. Look where I'm at. Look at the destitution we've had because 3 men made that decision and victimized her and then changed her life forever. Back in the 50s, your life is over. Like, you don't get any social support. People, you're a social pariah. The things that people think about you and judge you. Whereas my granny, to her dying day, was so religious. Like, she was so deeply devoted to Jesus. She was a Pentecostal, or like a holy roller is what they called them back then. And so it is just so weird to me that, like, 3 generations of women, their lives have been affected forever because of these 3 men that did that to her. And the result of that was the pregnancy of her only son, my uncle. And my mother had just celebrated her 16th birthday when her brother put a gun to his head. So, and the reason for that, I think, what I'm told at least, is that he was married to his high school sweetheart. She fell in love with or cheated on him, possibly with someone else. Or maybe their relationship was already rocky and they were looking at divorce, and then she found someone else pretty quickly after. I think she was a very beautiful woman, as far as I know. And they had 2 children together, and she said that she was taking the 2 children from him. He's never going to see them again, possibly moving to a different state with this man. And things went downhill from there, and he just didn't see any hope because his children were everything to him. Like, there was no other reason to live. And so that's what resulted from all of that heartbreak. And my granny had already had such a horrible life. As I write it out, I'm like, oh my gosh. You know, as I really look at it, I'm like, she lost her father at such a young age. She lost her mother. She didn't have any family support. This is insane. She had to raise these children, you know, without any help, without a father, all this stuff. But I do have to say that she was always pretty adamant that her children were everything to her, and her life definitely reflected that. I'm not going to get into a lot of details that way, but one of the interesting things is, because her son, her precious son, the only joy that came out of this, horrific sexual assault, it was her life and light and joy, and he passed away. That resulted in the rest of her life having depression. She ended up smoking more than she ever had, cigarettes that caused a stroke, and then diabetes, of course. And the last years of her life were pretty bad because she lost him. And my mother was 16. She lost her older brother, her only brother. And as far as I remember, my mother has never said his name. If she said it once. I can count on one hand in my lifetime how many times she ever even mentioned having a brother. And it usually was in relation to him dying by suicide. Now, my granny talked about him, and I'm really grateful that she did. I got a really wonderful story from her because of that. But it literally felt like how people probably, like in our family circle, it probably felt very similar to how people felt with the JFK shooting or something, like horrendous thing that the witnesses didn't want to talk about and that shocked the nation and stuff like that. That's what it felt like. So my uncle was a celebrity. My Uncle Randy was kind of this celebrity, this unspoken, like, crux of everything. It's why we ended up in Utah, when my mom had been born in Olathe, Kansas, and my granny had lived in Tennessee and Kentucky. So why did we end up in Utah, you know? And it marks a point where I think my mom was always a bit wild. I think she loved fun and she was very sociable, but it marks a point where she just didn't care and started on a path that obviously led to so much self-destruction and obviously harming others and children in the process. So my uncle was this Kurt Cobain figure to me, because I, being a millennial, obviously I knew Kurt Cobain's music on the radio, and I knew one of the most famous things that I knew about him as I came into an age where I could figure out that there's a world and that there's people and we talk about them. The most famous thing I knew about Kurt Cobain was that he did die by suicide. Well, I guess a lot of people think that's up for debate. I have no idea. I don't know what the controversy is. I was too young, okay? I don't know. But, and that he used drugs. And I'm pretty sure that my uncle, being a child of the 70s and being anti-war, I'm pretty sure he used, like, marijuana. I seem to feel like that was mentioned, but I don't know because I was a kid. And he might have done some drinking, which is obviously legal, so, and that's a depressant, which can really get you into a bad state sometimes. And when you're already in a bad state and you're isolated and alone, it can get worse. So it's understandable how this all kind of went together, why my grandma was so against drugs, and why a lot of people ended up being part of the Say No to Drugs campaign of the 80s and early 90s, which I was definitely a child of. So, well, Nancy Reagan's Say No to Drugs campaign, I'm guessing, and the Red Ribbon Week and stuff like that. But my Uncle Randy, he was a poet. He played guitar, and he was a good painter, and he was a good writer. He wrote his wedding vows. I think it's really fun in this book that I'm starting to realize that there are these public figures that I kind of put people with. One of the major stories that I remember being a millennial, first being aware of the news and that there's a president and all that stuff, was the impeachment of Clinton, where he was, there was a debate about whether or not he was lying about having relations with his intern, Monica Lewinsky. So this would have probably been 1996, I don't know, because I was so young. But that was the first time I was like, oh, there are trials like the O.J. Simpson trial or the Clinton impeachment. And I'm starting to realize there's a whole world out there, and there's people, and there's courts and judges and presidents and stuff like that. One of the things I learned is Kurt Cobain, right? And so Kurt Cobain had a daughter, and he had a wife, I think, or a girlfriend. I think it was Courtney Love. I'm not here to teach you on that, so I apologize for wasting your time. But the reason I bring all this up is there's, like, we laugh that I'm writing a book, and to me, my uncle is Kurt Cobain, right? He's like this tragic figure that, like, maybe dabbled in some things he shouldn't have that led to his demise, but he was so incredible. He was so kind-hearted. He was so loving. He was a genius. He had connections, and people thought he had real potential, and his life was cut short, right? And that's how I felt was my uncle was spoken about in that way. And so as a child, writing about these childlike feelings of how the people in your life are celebrities is not far off of how children feel. And I wonder, because I heard a really cool quote once that said, it's not surprising to me, and I can't remember who said the quote, and I hate when I can't attribute it, but it's not surprising to me that there are geniuses. It's surprising to me how many Nobel Prize winning geniuses are lost in sweatshops and have died in the fields and stuff like that. And I love that idea, because what separates my mom from Madonna? Money, right? The ability to create from her experiences. Well, my mom had life experiences very similar to Madonna without money. Same thing. What's the difference between you and Kurt Cobain, or my uncle and Kurt Cobain? Probably just money and location. As far as I know, he was like on the west coast of the United States, like probably in the Pacific Northwest area, like Oregon or Portland, Oregon, or Seattle, Washington, or something like that. That's the feel that he has anyway, and that's where the grunge rock scene was taking place. He may have died in like Los Angeles or something, because he was famous and, you know, had record labels and was making music videos and music and collaborating and going and like performing concerts and stuff like that, right? So probably somewhere like New York or Los Angeles later. Not that everyone needs a history lesson. I'm gonna get back on topic. My point is, is how many Kurt Cobains are out there right now? How many Kurt Cobains have notebooks that were left in Kansas and they're in an unmarked grave right now in Edgerton County Cemetery, like my uncle? How many people are there? Is there really that much of it? I had an alarm on my phone. Oh. And I am not tech savvy, so this is not going to go well. I got to figure out how to edit a video. I was definitely a millennial that grew up like extremely poor. I do not know technology at all. So when I say in my captions and stuff like no AI, it's because I wouldn't know where to begin with that. So here we are. I'm lucky to have to operate an iPhone that I have. But how many Kurt Cobains are out there? How many Madonnas are out there? I don't know. How many of them just don't have money, don't get discovered? How many of them die before they can write anything substantive? It's highly likely that my uncle really could have had that kind of potential. I don't know. I might be joking and delusional. My family, truly, we are buck-toothed, Kansas poor, like Kansas City on the Kansas side, buck-toothed, freckled, cow-licked poor, like non-fat dry milk mixed with water poor. So I don't know. We are not special. But I love the idea in my book, putting these things together that were happening at that time anyway. It definitely feels like, oh, we are definitely in 1992, right? Because Madonna and Kurt Cobain and everything. So it definitely puts a timestamp on it, but also, if you think about it, like, it's a fun delusion. It's a fun way to color the world. Maybe you have an aunt that, you know, that is quite the Marie Antoinette, like my aunt was. She, you know, is in a jazzy scooter right now because she loves cake. So let them eat cake, right? She really did believe that she needed to produce the first Dauphine, and she ended up only having daughters. She kept having children, hoping for that son. And so, you know, that perspective of metaphor in life, that we need allegories and we need metaphor in our life, it really helps. First of all, it's helping me. It's helping me feel like my uncle, who is literally in an unmarked grave right now at the end of Sunflower Road, is really just some misunderstood Kurt Cobain. And that can be fun. It can provide some much needed comic relief in a very sad story that I'm writing. But it also helps us realize that everyone is a beautiful Madonna in her heyday, or a Kurt Cobain with his next, stanza ready to be written. If only we had a little more time, if only someone took the time to witness us and to hear us and to understand us. I can't do much for my uncle, and he is so very long dead. Very, very long dead now. But for my granny, for my uncle, and for my mom's sake, I am honored that I get to tell a story about, and just like witness them. And witness them in a way that is very Sylvia Plath, It definitely smacks of limerence, and I don't care. I thought I cared because I've had a lot of people make fun of my books. Someone criticized my work saying that I speak in passive tense instead of active voice. I use passive voice. And as someone who at least partially identifies as feminine, and as somebody who has been a victim of abuse my entire life and is so profoundly poor, we're not even talking like middle class, we're not talking working class, we're talking impoverished class. Like, my uncle broke ground to plant radishes. Sorry, there was a nice loud truck. To plant radishes for his son, his 2-year-old son, to eat, when in mid-1970s there was such a bad level of inflation, gold standard was abandoned and everything. My great-grandfather, my grandmother's father, was a sharecropper. They lost everything in the roaring 20s and the stock market crash. They used to have a car, they used to have a house, and then they were a sharecropper. I know people whose parents lived in like a chicken coop and then graduated to living in the barn. So it's not glorifying at all. It's not fun. It's not glamorizing. It doesn't feel glamorous. It's not fun. But you can witness people through art and make it beautiful. And I've seen so many writers do that. I've seen so many lyricists and artists do that. Basquiat did that, and I love him for that. And I have no idea where this book is going, and I'm scared. I'm scared that it doesn't matter, but it has changed me drastically, and I wanted to share some of those insights so that I remember what I'm doing in this process. And then I also think it's a really important thing that the absolute destitute, indigent burial fund level people get their art too. So as much as I value Whitman, I also want some Ginsberg. I do. I want to be on the road with Kerouac, and I also enjoy Plath. So, and I feel like it is my duty to tell those stories, and I will be. Who knows what will happen with that, but I am absolutely thrilled. I am thrilled with this work, and it has been the most enjoyable book I've written so far. and that's not even saying anything, because all my books have been absolutely awful to write, from beginning to end, with very little pleasure in the middle. And I really hope that something happens here. I'm super excited. I did find a name for it, and I'm really excited, and maybe I'll talk about that in the next video about what it means. And if nothing else, just like every other one of my books, this has been worth it for the therapy. But it would be really nice if like other people read it and I don't know, it helped, or it was impressive, you know? My work, the dedication I put into it, all the hours, was really impressive. I hope it is. And yeah, I guess I'm really impressed with it though. I'm really impressed with how it's coming together. I'm really grateful. I really do feel like my grandmother is with me and she is helping me write this. And she has been since the beginning. She gives me images. I've remembered things I should not have remembered. She is right there with me. And for the record, I am not religious. I am not religious. And I find myself feeling so many things that I don't understand because I'm not a believer in any of that. I just can't be. And yet here we are. My uncle helped me write this. My Kurt Cobain uncle, Randy, helped me write this. And I have such a limerence for him, just like I have a limerence for Kurt Cobain. I really did love Nirvana. It was an awesome band. And the same thing, like I have discovered love for even my mother, even my abuser mother, in realizing that she was just as glamorous and complicated and scary as Madonna was. So this has been a really fun journey. And more than anything, I'm just so grateful I get to love my grandma, my granny who raised me. It was an honor to be loved by her. And I'm so glad she's with me. It's an honor to write her story, even if nobody else reads it. I'm pretty sure my best friend will read it though. But even if no one else reads it, it was an honor to do her justice. This nobody from Tennessee. She thought her feet were too big, and when she got older, she hated her double chin, and she had emphysema from smoking, just like her father. And I don't care. I love her. And this is such a beautiful journey. And thanks for anyone who is